All right, welcome everybody. Like I said, my name is Shashi, and we're going to talk about Hinduism, not so much about like the religion itself, but the learnings from the religion and how did I choose to interpret it for my benefit, and hopefully you guys might find some of these nuggets useful for your lives, right? Certainly we can open up the floor for question answers. Not that I'm going to have all the answers, but it's a discussion basically. And the idea here is there are two important takeaways here. Is this notion of eternal, which is the time, the notion of time basically is questioned, and oneness. We all are basically one. So that's the summary of it, and let's try to see how we can get there. Now, as you know, reality is the most important thing to us, right? Here we have Marina, we have Hemant, we have all these people on the audiences, and my laptop is tangible. So I'm speaking, you're listening to my voice, and that to us is the reality, right? I mean, that's the reality, and we deal with this every day. So reality can be, if we were to define, hey, what is reality? Reality can be all kinds of things, my family, my possessions, my money, my car, my house. For some people, it can be the religion, and that is also part of this so-called reality. And for some people who are even more spiritual, it could be nirvana, or some other state of being where they have transcended everything, right? And they are like Buddha himself, right? For average people like me, it might still be bills. Bills is the reality, that I have to pay the mortgage and all of that stuff. My job, my boss, my annoying work colleague, and all of that stuff, right? So all of this is so-called reality. So here I kind of break it up into, as I go from my mind, thoughts, body, right? As you start going from inside to outside, my body, my house, my bank balance, all of that, my other people. Now, other people, the very first other people that we will see is maybe your wife or your husband or your son, your lover. Then you look at your neighbor, then you look at the whole people, all the people in the nation, then the whole world, right? So you start, this is how your reality expands from you. So thoughts is also part of that reality. Now, is this reality, right? Is this the reality? That's what, put yourself in the shoe of a person. Again, we are not talking about anything high tech here, but despite the fact that we're not talking anything about high technology here, a lot of it is relevant, no matter what age you are in. Like, this was created or discussed like 5,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. And so now, it's still very relevant. All this discussion is very, very relevant, just very contemporary. So then there is this other aspect, right, which is consciousness, which makes us a sentient being. There is a very first person experience, so-called, that we tend to have, where I can appreciate you guys, and you guys are listening and interpreting whatever is coming out of my mouth, and you're building some questions around it and all of that stuff, right? So there is a give and take that is going on right now, and there is that first person experience that I'm speaking and you're listening, and there is sunlight here, and I'm sitting in a room, and that has nothing to whatsoever to do with intelligence per se. Okay, there is something that makes us aware of all these things, right? So what we tend to do is we say, those few objects that I mentioned earlier, thought, body, the world. So there is a sense of I am, and then there is all these other things on the object side. And they can start from the bill, my boss, my work colleague, my kids, the money, I need it. So there is a certain action, and then these are the objects, and the subject is out here. And we tend to see the subject to actually be this mind and body, right? Me, I need my car, I need this house, I need my job for survival, and I hate this other person, I love this other person. I do not like this politics, I like that politics. And this makes me angry, I'm fearful of that, right? So all of this stuff, is all happening right here. But what one wants to, like what these guys, these sages back in the days, what they said is, how about you think about it more at one more level higher, which is, hey, look at me, I'm angry at XYZ. Hey, look at me, I'm loving this other person. Hey, look at me, I'm hungry, right? So there is something, as if there's something that is that can actually witness us going through these emotions. And that is that awareness, that consciousness, this sense of I am. When you take away this, actually, I'll come to the God part, but that's why I just dotted line. Let's say you take away the money, you take away kids, you take away the job, you take away the bills, everything is paid off. You still have some activity going on, right, in your mind and body. You might still be worried about future. You might be enjoying some past memory, right? Just imagining things. But then there is also, like, let's say even there was a way for you to shut down your mind as well. There is a notion of I am, and that is the ultimate reality, is what Hinduism wants to wants us to consider. And that is what they did, right? And there is a whole canon of literature and books and ways to address these questions that might be around this, written back thousands of years ago. And all kinds of questions that might have come in your mind have already been asked by a lot of these people. They have been documented, and it's a vast literature around this just these two words, like I am, and what can we do with that, right? And okay, great, now we know this part. How can we utilize this? So one of the key things is in Hinduism, one of the things that we all tend to know about Hinduism is, oh, they tend to have 33 million gods or something, right? And there is caste system, and there is XYZ, there's this, there's that, right? And in other religions, there is a notion of monotheism, right? One God and all of that, right? But Hinduism, what happens is, yes, there is all these rituals, gods, everything. But then they want us to think in terms of, now this was not really accessible for lots of people. But if you look at the depth of the literature, what they are really pointing us to is, okay, you think of it as a ladder. And as you're climbing the ladder, you're climbing means you're using those steps as to move up. But you don't like stay attached to the step that you just kind of crossed and went up, right? So all the things, food, family, friends, neighbor, country, laws, and even God, right? These are all the steps that we have created in this system of, what helps us survive on this planet, to explain things and have a notion of peace and understanding, and in this transactory world that we live in. So so this highest philosophy that they have in Hinduism is, what they say is, even God is something that a human being created as that one final step on the ladder for you to ultimately realize that, hey, look, that is a figment of my imagination, even God. Now, that is a great thing, and we're going to talk about how it can help lots of people, right? But the idea is, again, you're stuck on that ladder. How can I transcend past that ladder? And what is past that ladder, right? That is what it wants us to point to. So going back to one of the most fundamental, if we don't, Hinduism doesn't really have a concept like one single book, like a mythology, not mythology, but where all the truths are. There's no such thing as a Bible per se. But if there was anything closer to Bible for Hinduism, it would be Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad means God, Gita means song, God's song, literally. So Krishna is kind of like the figurehead, sort of like Jesus Christ, if you will, right? And from Christianity. So he's kind of like a demigod, a Messiah, if you will. But he's also a very playful God. So in the sense that he is part of the world, he has love affairs, he has consorts, he is very real, and he's tricking people, he's sometimes lying, he's sometimes stealing actually. But then he's also fighting, and he's also talking about non-violence, and he's a very colorful, interesting character. And he's very loved, in general, by majority of the Indians or Hindu people, right? So one of the quotes he has in Bhagavad Gita, at some future time, we'll talk about Bhagavad Gita if you want, but today I'm not going to spend any time on it. But the quote that I want us to bring it back to this notion of reality is the unreal does not come into existence. The real never goes out of existence. So that is the fundamental principle, right, of the Hinduism. What is real means real is something that always exists. Okay, it's not like we are born and we're going to die. So as per this principle, we are unreal. Our bodies are unreal, right? So every object that you see on the planet is all unreal because everything gets destroyed. It is anything that is getting created is going to go away. That's why it doesn't exist, right? So that is the fundamental principle that he lays out. And what is unreal? Unreal is something that never exists. So then what is the point of talking about it, right? That's the whole thing. They call it asat. Sat means something that is real. Sat also happens to be the same term in Sanskrit for truth, and asat is kind of like something that does not exist. And also it is also another terminology for falsity. But then there are things, we cannot deny the fact that this world exists. My body is there, everything is tangible. It feels so real. Yet it is going to die, So that is what the Hinduism philosophy wants to call it, as borrowed existence. It borrows existence. Now, how does it borrow the existence? We're going to talk about that, right? So here, it's as if it's an illusion, right? So when you are in a desert, you can see a mirage. That mirage, for those first few seconds for you, it can kind of put you into like, that seems like reality. And it feels like, oh, there's water there. But immediately you realize, oh, wait, this is desert. This cannot be true. This is not true, right? Now, that is a much more simplistic explanation of what we feel like real in this world, like this whole sense of me talking, you listening, all of this, right? So there are these three categories, so there is the real, unreal, and then there is illusion. Illusion is where both are truth, existence and non-existence, because they come and go away, and they are so-called borrowed existence. So now what they do is, this is where, again, notice all of this is nothing, there's nothing about God or anything. It's just me looking at myself, my human experience, my daily thing. So there is one more state that one more thing that we are going to try to understand of our daily being to really explain this illusory nature of this reality. As I'm talking, you're listening. Why is it an illusion? So as we saw earlier, right? This is a wakeful state. Our mind, our body, my lips are moving, a voice is coming out. There are senses, objects, and your ears are active. You're listening to me. That is our so-called wakeful state, right? All our body parts are working. There is an experience going on, right? And there is another state that we have when we sleep. So when we fall asleep, guess what? Our senses are not working, but there is a real sense of almost reality when you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, that nightmare feels very real. You can have sweats, you get thirsty, you get angry, you get fearful, but then you realize that, boy, that was all a lie. That was just, oh my God, I was so scared of that line that I saw in my dream, right? So that is that the dreaming state. And then there is also a deep sleep state. Deep sleep state is, again, something where even your mind has shut down. So we went from here, the objects go away, senses go away. The mind is actively projecting all the images in your dream, right? And this is all made up, right? Again, your mind has brought this out of your own experiences, and it is projecting a reality in the dreaming sense, in the dreaming state. But in deep sleep state, there's nothing to project. The mind has shut down, senses have gone away, and it is a complete darkness, right? So we, in our lingo, what we would say, in our language, what we would call that is, oh, we're kind of not conscious during that state. Now, what Vedanta is going to do is, or Hinduism is going to do is, it's going to flip it upside down. It's going to say that, consciousness is always there, yet there is nothing to shine upon. Here what happens is, there are objects that these senses, my eyes, when my eyes are open, or your ears are listening, because there is a voice that is bringing some waves to your ears. And so it is as if your ears are alive and they want to listen, right? And they have the right instruments to capture the audio signals. And the object now has a real existence because of you. The audio exists, I exist, my voice exists because of your ear. So your ear is, again, you go back from your ear to something happens in your mind that says, hey, I'm listening to that voice. But even mind is also like, there is something that is helping mind to understand those electrical pulses that are going through your brain and all of that, interpreting all of that. And that is that consciousness, right? So there is this first person experience that they talk about, or, we feel that there's nothing unique that they're talking about. What is feeding all of this, right? What is the reality that is feeding all of this is consciousness. So one of the things that Hinduism wants us to consider, and it's a theory, nobody can prove it, but there are proofs more from a philosophical point of view. Now, there is a large literature around it to prove this notion that consciousness is always there, right? Your objects come about and go away. Your senses come and go away. Your mind comes and goes away. Consciousness never goes away. Now, our lecture is not going to be trying to decode that and explain that. The point of this is, how can I utilize what Hinduism is trying to say in this particular proposition, and how I can utilize that in my real life to transact better in this world. Okay, I just want to set that straight, because we don't have that much time to cover that literature. That literally takes, there's like reams and reams of documents that have been written, and all the questions have been answered. And, obviously the idea here is to trigger you guys. And, if you guys want to explore, yeah, there's a ton of information available. A lot of it is for free on Google, right? I can point to some of that. Okay, so we, from the wakeful state, we can look at the dreaming state and say, that is false. That dream was false. And what happens in the wakeful state, right? Also, from the wakeful state, we can say, boy, I slept like a baby in the deep sleep. And the point that Hinduism is trying to say is, your consciousness never really falls asleep. It never goes away. It is always steady, always existing. It never comes to birth and never dies, right? And my consciousness, your consciousness, it's all just one. That's it. And it is always trying to shine the objects, and the objects come alive. And that's how the universe is born, or the world is born. World exists because of consciousness. That's why the objects get the so-called borrowed consciousness. So they come into existence and then they go away because we are not paying attention to it, right? So it's as if they don't exist, right? So that's how they want us to think about it. And what happens in our wakeful state? In our wakeful state, there are a couple of these terminologies that, in Hinduism they use, which is Dharma. So Dharma basically means our responses to what we see in this state of my being. Remember, I am calling this as a state, as if water can be a boiling steam, but it can also be lukewarm water, and it can also be an ice. These are all transitory states. So they come and go away. But the reality in all of these states is H2O, the water, right? So now in this particular state, which we are very, very associated, we say, this is the truth, this is reality. We live on this plane all the time. So what do we do in this plane? In this plane, what happens is we run into our neighbor, we run into our kid, we run into our wife or somebody else. There's a transaction happening, we are responding. And that is this Dharma. That is, we are trying to follow our duties, maybe, right? We are doing some action deeds. Now this Dharma, if we do the right thing, right things will happen. And that is this whole thing about results, the karma, right? Karma is what comes out of what you think is your right duty at that given point of time. And we are consciously making that decision, like, oh, this is what I'm going to do, or that is what I'm going to do, with a expectation of a result. And sometimes it has to do with artha. Artha means earning money. It would be money, or maybe property, houses, whatever, your car, right? So that is my goal. So that's why I take a certain action, responding to a certain need, blah, 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 right? So Dharma leads to a karma and leads to artha. And, we kind of associate with these things as what defines me. My definition of me is I'm a software engineer because that pays my bills. Or I'm a father because that takes care of my kid, right? So I have my duty, I have my possession. My family is my possession. And then what happens out of this is this kama. Kama is different from karma. Kama means pleasure. I get some kind of pleasure out of it. And one thing to remember about pleasures is it can be very deceitful, in the sense that that pleasure wants you to do that particular activity again and again and again, because it goes away, and then you want to relive that experience. So you do it again, it goes away, do it again, goes away. And what that does is this is what Buddha in Buddhism, which kind of came out of Hinduism, he says that life is suffering, so we do all this stuff to get some kind of pleasure, and many times we fail. So that is an obvious pain that we are dealing with. But even pleasure is a suffering because it goes away. It doesn't sustain. So life is suffering. Life is suffering is the bottom most fundamental mantra of Hinduism, right? So now how do you deal with it? Life is a suffering. How do you deal with it? So there is another word that they use is sansara. Sansara is, this is our day-to-day experience, right? You know, we are living, we look at something and we say, oh boy, you know, I wish I had that. That generates a desire. So we go create an action out of it, right? So we say, oh, I'm going to need that. I'm going to go do my karma or my action to get that. And out of that karma, you're going to get, you know, some kind of pleasure or some kind of sorrow because you're going to win or lose. That both of these things are going to cause some kind of suffering because you're not going to be able to repeat that pleasureful experience, and that is going to give you suffering, or the pleasure goes away. That's why you will be suffering, right? And then there is also a thing about pleasure is this notion of diminishing returns, right? You know, when you keep repeating that that activity that gives you joy over time, you're not going to get the same amount of pleasure that you got the last time. And that's why you also feel, boy, I don't even know why I like that activity to begin with, right? So there is this notion of suffering. So then what happens is you kind of go back and you say, I want to relive this whole thing. And then you are stuck in this wheel, in this state here, on this wakeful state, right? So that is what Hinduism wants to define our living state. And the goal of this is you want to be on this planet, in this transitory world. Obviously, we know that dreams are false, but look at this cycle and try to get out of that cycle. Get out of that cycle means liberation. Liberation means I am not going to be sucked into lackness, desires, and I'm not going to create new actions because I'm trying to participate in this rat race, all of that. So what that is observe everything from the place of consciousness. Witness your anger coming, witness your fear coming. And you know that when you're angry with something, that anger exists and it is going to go away. And you can just base it off of your past experience. And it's as if you are observing yourself. You're separated, you're two basically now, but you're one. But you're two in the sense that, hey, you're observing that little me, and that separation suddenly gives you a different perspective of yourself. And that state is really the liberation. Or, you know, a lot of the religions, they tend to call it salvation and this and that, right? So that is really what it is. And so, I mean, what happens with this kind of philosophy is suddenly everything that you see, a book that you might have read, you know, or an experience that you've had, good or bad, you know, you have a totally different perspective. Has nothing to do with religion. Look at it, you know, we have not yet talked about any God here. So one of the questions that happens in the writings is one of the writer basically says, are these just two states? You know, we say there are three states here, right? Wakeful, dreaming, and deep sleep. But what he wants to propose is that they are really only two states. So waking and dreaming is both a dream-like state, because when I'm here talking to you, there is really no way for us to prove that this is not a dream. You know, it is quite possible that Marina is still in Spain and she might be having a dream or possibly a nightmare that I'm talking forever. So there is no real way to understand that this life that we think is real is not real, you know, is not a dream. There's no way to prove that, because if you put yourself in the shoe of the person who is living in this nightmare, that whatever that person is experiencing, for that person, that time, you almost feel everything is happening. Oh my God, this is going to hurt me. And you actually have sweats, right? Only when you come up to this state and look down, you say, oh yeah, that was a lie. So there is nothing here that, you know, we can say if this is real or not. And that is where it wants us to. So when you go from this state to this state, it's a waking up, right? So you wake up from your sleep and you suddenly realize, that was a nightmare. Now what happens? You don't wake up from here to consciousness. That is just a knowledge, is what a lot of the teachers say. Is they say it's not like you're waking up from sleep. It's a new understanding of this wakeful state. That understanding will help you live this wakeful state in a much better way. So one of the things one of the teachers says is, hey, the reason why we want to call this wakeful state as a dream is because, hey, look, we know that this real life for a lot of us is suffering. Some of us are enjoying it, right? So if it is considered as a dream, and if I am in control of this dream, why not dream a better dream, right? Why always take a particular incident and get dragged down by that incident into a state of fear, state of anger, or state of like, oh my God, I really need this, and the attachment, and the pang of leaving somebody and all of that stuff, right? So it is very painful. So when you look at that pain from a perspective of, oh, that's going to go away. So dream a better dream, even for your wakeful state. Bring it to a state where it is going to make you live this life much happily. So there is this notion of these states, right? Deep sleep, dream, wakeful. If you think about it, right? These are senses that have given themselves more almost clarity, So there is no senses here. There are some senses here because the activity is happening in the mind. And now we have your eyes are open, ears are open, but even your eyes can only see 7 colors, right? So it's not a full experience, if you will, right, of the reality. So one of the things that they want us to think about is this, really this whole entire world, if you think about it, you're watching a movie, it could be a 3D movie, but what if these kind of instruments were developed to make you, like all of this can be an extrasensory movie, right? And that is what this is, this real life is. Now, so I'm going to skip a lot of this, right? Because I think we're running out of time here. Every experience in every state, as we said, is pleasurable or painful in its given state. Reality of that experience is not true when seen from higher states. Objects from higher states cannot be used in the lower states. So for example, if you're thirsty in the dream, you're not going to have the sense of waking up and going down to your kitchen, opening the fridge and getting water. That all of those objects have to be in your dream. In the dream, you need to find the water and then your thirst goes away. That's the point. Every wakeful state is a new birth. That is another thing that they want you to think. You wake up in the morning, forget your past, right? I mean, that we talk about this, let go. We talk about movies, try to tell us about this, but this is a new way to understand that, right? Much like every dream, we are new us, right? In the dream, except for, what is that other dream? Damn it, I'm forgetting the name, but where you have this continuity. But this is where, you want to think about your wakeful state is a new state every day you wake up. It's just a new perspective on life, right? Where the past is not giving you nightmares when you're transacting with that same person who was annoying. So ultimately what they are saying is that, think of this world as this consciousness dreaming, as if one being, and the name that they use is Brahman. Brahman is just another name for consciousness. As if consciousness is dreaming this world and we are part of that dream. So guess what? When I'm dreaming something, every object in that dream is my figment of imagination, as if they are me. Even that nightmare person is just my imagination. So as if I gave birth to it. So we are part of like this Brahman, right? So everything emerges out of consciousness, vanishes back into it. I'm going to skip this. Let's get to. So ultimately, right, so there is this me that is called a jiva, this limited, when you are associated with your mind and body, it is the so-called jiva. The world is out there. And then what they want us to think about is that world only exists because of your consciousness. And that consciousness is always searching for that higher self, higher Brahman consciousness through those 5 sheets. What are these 5 layers? Our 5 layers are our physical layer, the energy that we feel, for example, we feel happy and sad and all of that, right? So those are the energies, mental states, the wisdom, like we have our brain, and then there is this happiness, the state of bliss that we feel, right? So all of that, it is this jiva, this my limited me, trying to find that larger me. So there are these 4 key things. Consciousness is that which is aware of objects. So through us, consciousness is aware of objects. And so there are these 2 terminologies that they use, which is Brahman and Atman. Atman is me, right? My soul. And Brahman is this consciousness. So consciousness gives me the power to sense an object, basically. Now, consciousness cannot be object of anything, like science is trying to define what consciousness is, and they have not been able to so far. Why? Because we are in that wakeful state, which is limited by its own state. So from that state, you cannot look at, from a dream state, you cannot look at the wakeful state. It's just kind of like that. So from the wakeful state, you cannot have sensors and any of that kind of stuff to kind of look at consciousness, because the moment you're going to do that, guess what? You're again going to be using consciousness. So consciousness cannot ever be object of anything, but you can still experience it from your day-to-day thing. Now, what is an experience? Experience, that our day-to-day experience is basically there is an object, and that object is manifesting this consciousness. So you need consciousness and you need an object, and that basically forms an experience. Any object you experience cannot be consciousness. It's the same thing as consciousness cannot be object of anything. So the bottom line is, universe is not the way I see it. So I am one without an other. Now, what is this I that they're talking about? I have that consciousness, and then I also have that my ego and my mind. So there are these 2 I's that I have. But this I that they're talking about is that I consciousness. And you also have that. We all have that consciousness. And that I is one, among all of us, it's just one. And that is why they use this terminology called as non-dual or Advaita. Advaita means 2, Advaita means non-dual. So it's one, basically. One truth, which is consciousness. Like I said, it is called as Brahman. And the other thing that they want us to consider is world is an appearance. World is absurd, because it comes and goes. You think you understand it, but you don't understand it, right? So it's that kind of stuff. And so they want us to think in terms of non-duality and also in terms of cessation. Cessation means not so much like I'm giving up on the world, but more about like the reality as I see it in this world. I want to imagine a better reality, if you will. Like that reality that I'm seeing, which is bothering me, I need to drop that reality, right? So there are a couple of things that, and there's a lot of philosophy behind this. Without I, you do not exist, right? So my consciousness or your consciousness makes my reality reality. Like my consciousness, you exist. Without I consciousness, objects not exist. So this is, if you will, the birth of universe, right? Without I consciousness, even my thoughts not exist. So this is another very interesting thing, which we don't tend to kind of associate with, is even the thoughts that come in our mind are also just objects. Not only just this cup or this laptop, but even our thoughts are the objects. Without I consciousness, even body mind does not exist. This body mind, my hand, my mouth, it's kind of by itself, it's useless if the consciousness doesn't exist, right? So, and they use this clay and pot analogy in a lot of places. So unfortunately, you cannot see this top part. So I'm going to just escape out of this just for a moment, just to make my point here, which is, and what is the Vedanta philosophy, right? So Hinduism had Vedas, Vedas is this vast literature of rituals and practices. What is God, blah, 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 33 million gods, if you will, all that stuff, right? So it's as if, imagine a knife, the blunt edge of the knife is the Vedas. The sharper edge of it at the top, or if you will, the cutting edge, that is where that is the end of the Veda, and they call it Vedanta. Vedanta, because it kind of brings out the essence of all of the Hinduism. And the three important canon of literature there is Brahma Sutra, Upanishad. Upanishad is almost kind of like, come sit near me. That's what it means. What it is it's as if these teachers from 3,000-4,000 years ago, or 2,000 years ago, or whatever, hundreds of years ago, they are almost kind of talking to us, and you're sitting near them, and they are taking this vast philosophy and summarizing to us, right? That's what those, there are 108 of those or more of those. And sometimes, a lot of new authors write their own Upanishad as well, to kind of summarize. There are nice, interesting stories, and as part of that. And also many times it is just a very philosophical, logical discussion. And in fact, they are sort of kind of taking us away from God, because they want us to not think rituals in terms of rituals in terms of transcendence. How can you do this ritual only to realize that there is a certain truth behind this ritual, and that is the truth that I want to get to, the ladder. I want to be on this step of ritual to get to that top step. I don't want to get stuck. And that is what has happened to Hinduism in India, I would say, is that, with my mom, same thing. And in most of the religion, right? So we are stuck on that ladder. We are not able to think what is reality of our human existence, right? So we have these wars and fights, religious issues, and all kinds of ecosystem issues, like one person says, there is a energy crisis. The other person says, no, there isn't, blah, blah, blah. Right? So there's so much stuff. And then the other one that a lot of people, the Indians, relate to is Bhagavad Gita. If you don't have any time to do any of this stuff, you could just open a Bhagavad Gita, any translation, doesn't matter. You can literally just spend some time with it. It will give you a much better understanding of your existence, life. And, it takes a lot of different perspectives, and, it's just an outstanding book. So the approach to this philosophy is ultimate purpose of life is analysis of oneself. Why do you want to analyze oneself? Because that is how you analyze others, not by just saying, hey, look, you have a problem. No, that is a completely wrong. We tend to live in a world where we are always observing the other people and kind of giving advice to the other people, right? But here what they're saying is, come back to your home, come back to yourself, try to see how that other event on this planet is impacting you, and first search yourself. Once you find yourself, you can resolve, you can help out the rest of the world in a much better place, from a much better place. And you will be able to find a solution, not out of anger or fear, but responding to the reality of the situation. And if we all did that, we probably wouldn't have energy crisis. We probably wouldn't have all of this stuff. But unfortunately, we are stuck in rituals. We are stuck with like our beliefs, our thoughts, which, as Hinduism says, those come and go away. Your thoughts will change. Your expectations will change. So life has three states: waking, dream, deep sleep. We saw that. Proposition is there's one reality. All our three states are happening in my consciousness. And so I like this analogy that one of the teacher makes is, when you read any literature or any book or anything for that matter, be it Hinduism or not, it doesn't matter. It's kind of like us looking in the mirror and realizing, oh man, I need to brush my teeth, or I need to wash my face. And when you're washing your face, you're not washing the mirror. So this world is the mirror. When you see a problem out there, you want to take that toothpaste and brush and try to fix yourself. When you fix yourself, And what that means is you're not going to solve the world problem, but you want to make sure that it doesn't leave any imprints or impressions on your mind that is going to make you angry and do more further destruction, maybe around your family or around your friend circle or anything near you. And so I really like that analogy there. Um, every good bad happening is a path to evolution. You know, any incident that is happening to you, that you get impacted, it's a learning experience. And you know, they say that, you know, God has chosen you. Again, I talk about God, but it's just a metaphor. It's he has chosen you to, for you to kind of now suddenly realize it's an element of surprise, right? You know, boom, you know, something happens and you kind of wake up. That waking up is now giving you a chance to get that knowledge. Remember I said, you know, from dream to wakeful state, you just have to wake up. So you come out of sleep. But from the wakeful state, you want to go to consciousness. When something bad happens, your reality is shattered. Your world transactional reality is shattered. At that time, now you are conscious of, boy, you know, what the heck is going on, right? And that is really, now you're very, very close to consciousness. So you want to be thankful. So that is that knowledge that will help you transcend, right, in those things, those ways. Persuades, it's a Hinduism is trying to persuade us to develop that positive outlook, right? So back to this, let's see. All right, so there's a ton of Hindu literature, you know, but really the bottom line is a lot of people get stuck at some place, somewhere on this ladder, and then they think that that is it, right? You know, somebody might say, this is it, man, this music, the guitar I play, that's the end of it. That's it, right? Or this learning about philosophy. That's it. That's it. That's it. There's nothing else. But, you know, how can we ultimately get back to how does it impact me? If you've not really answered yourself, understood yourself, then no matter what you do, you're still dwelling in this transactory, illusory world. You've not really understood the meaning of life as to, like, you know, I want to go find myself, basically. So there are a lot of these analogies about pot and, you know, light. You know, there's this consciousness is as if it's the sunlight. So sunlight is always there, even in the night sky. When it looks so dark, it is dark for a reason, but, you know, there's no objects in, you know, oh, sorry, not the night sky. But if you go out in deep space, there is light. It just so happens that there's no object to capture that light. One of the examples is the projector. Like, you know, when you're looking at a presentation, the projector lights up the screen, but, you know, you can see the image on the wall, or the movie projector. You can see the image on the wall, but there is light that is going. And if you put your hand in the middle of that light, your hand is going to shine. So the point that this analogy is trying to make is consciousness is always there. You know, it's all pervading. In fact, one of the things they say is this whole notion of space, forms, and everything arise in consciousness, even the notion of time. In fact, time is what gives us, the mind, the ability to kind of be fearful and angry, worry about the past, worry about the future, all of that. And this kind of causes us to desire that lackness and getting pulled back into the samsara, or the circle of life. In practical use, what can you do with this kind of philosophy? You know, we say that all the actions, whatever you do, good, bad, ugly, horrible things, consider it as the fact that it is trying to push us towards spirituality. As long as one doesn't learn from that particular activity, we are pushed around by our good and bad actions. So what happens is a good action might lead you to something, and bad action might lead to hurting other people and all of that. And you probably have not learned anything from that. And you're causing a lot of pain on this planet, and not only just the planet, but also to yourself. You know, you don't realize that maybe you're not like a lot of the greedy business people or whatever, right? You know, you see all this capitalism, this and that, right? So these are people who are just walking around on the planet blind. So we're hurting the planet as well, right? As one evolves, the good bad karma helps spiritual evolution, right? So that is the goal of life. None of our experiences are denied, right? This transactional world is real as much as when you're in the dream state, that dream is a reality for that dream it's very much real. So it's not saying that this is unreal, so don't deal with it. Don't talk to your wife, don't talk, because that is all unreal. That's not the point. The point is that if anger springs, your fear springs, you might want to have a better perspective of what's happening. Put yourself in the shoe of the other person, because guess what? That other person is also the same consciousness that you are. So suddenly you have a different understanding of that other person, right? So I'm going to skip this. So there's we are fearful of death, and all along there's all these names and forms and possessions and all of that. I think we have talked about this, and we are stuck in this. And there are two important things that we have, which is this little me, myself, ego, and this whole world that bothers me. The others, me and others. That is our human experience. And there are a couple of things that we do with this is, human suffers from ego, like, me, myself, I want this, blah, 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 right? I deserve this. Why am I not getting this? And then humans like to judge others, which is, hey, man, you are horrible, or hey, you are amazing, you're lovely, your skin is beautiful, and I love you, right? Blah, blah, blah. So we tend to, these two are very, very fundamental to our existence, right? So I like to quote Oscar Wilde. He says, I always pass on good advice. It is the only thing I do with it. It is never of any use to oneself. And what is the best example of this is Twitter and Facebook, right? We tend to tell other people how they need to live their lives. And we never come back to our home and try to see what problems I might be causing on this planet. So what can we do with these two fundamental things that cause us suffering? I worry about myself only, I'm selfish, I want to buy this, I want to have 15 cars, I want to have Rolex watches, blah, 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 whatever. And then I hate this other person, I love this other person. So these are our fundamental emotions. What can we do about it, right? So a couple of things that they say is, there's ego and there's actions. How can we channel this into a positive direction? So, if you are one of those people who loves working, do not believe in God, that's okay. So on the work front, what one can do to utilize or channel this in a proper direction is you humble yourself. Every action you do, every activity you do, you say, I am serving you, Mr. Employee. Let's say you're the manager, let's say you're the CEO of the company, it doesn't matter. This kind of activity might be easier for a janitor, for example, right? Because he's already in a very humble situation. So he is helping other people. But this kind of stuff is very hard for somebody who is in upper layer, like a CEO and stuff like that, right? So why would a CEO say, hey, look, man, janitor, I'm here to help you? But if he has that attitude, that doesn't take away his CEO-ship. He's still the CEO, but it will make the life of that janitor much more pleasant. And it will also make the life of the CEO much more pleasant, rather than having an angry employee walking around on his floor, right? So they say on your work, every activity you do, let's say you're writing program, let's say you're helping something, you're present, whatever, right? It is, I'm helping you. How can I help you? The attitude needs to be, how can I help you, right? Now, let's say you're on the God side, right? You do believe in God. The point of believing in God is also, why do we do that? Why is God important? I don't believe in God, but a lot of people believe in God, and I appreciate that. That is awesome, if you can. Because what you're really trying to do is like, there's something larger than me. I go away from God, I do my prayer, go out in the world and say, boy, this person is horrible. And, that person is this and that. And why? Because I feel really powerful at that instance. But then I come back to God and I pray in my hand, my hands are closed and I bow down. At that time, what you're saying is this little me is little. God is bigger than me. This imaginary thing that I pray is way bigger than me. Again, trying to control my ego And then when I go out in the world, I can also probably, it might help me to see that, hey, this is God's creation and I'm helping. When I am expressing my anger or jealousy or whatever, I'm actually hurting God, right? So that is one way to utilize this. And when you're praying, what you're working on is concentration, right? So that is one approach. The other approach is where we now suddenly realize work is not that important, God is not that important, I mean, this is not working out for me. Then what you do is you try to go on hikes by yourself. You go into the jungle, go on the mountains, walk, or you go to the gym. You're working on yourself, you're working on your body. You go to yoga, you're working on your breathing techniques. So what has happened is it has taken you away from the work, away from God, you're coming closer to yourself, right? Again, this is to bring about a balance. And so all these paths are important, but you know what? You don't want to get stuck in these paths. You want to use them as a ladder step to move up. And what is this up? This up is realizing that there is that infinite self, the consciousness, right? And you cannot, as much as this logic is very, very simplistic and you understand that, but you know what? When we are living on this planet and transacting with world, we are going to get angry. We are going to feel jealousy. We are going to want to buy things and do things, be materialistic, look down upon a janitor, whatever, that's going to happen. So one of the things they suggest is you want to keep this thing in your mind as you go through the thing, whatever state you are in, try to remind this yourself, and this will happen at the end of the day. You will become that infinite self. Once you're that infinite self, what is the benefit? Is that suddenly you come back to this ego and judging. We like to judge others. Soon what will happen is this ego, you will start this self from the self's perspective, from the consciousness perspective, you're going to start judging yourself. Not so much to look down upon yourself, but really witnessing. And when that starts happening, you have found your infinity. You're expressing your finite self in terms of that infinite self, right? And now you suddenly realize, boy, that other person is just like me. And there is this oneness that starts developing, right? And these 4 paths, by the way, are also the yogas, right? This is called as the karma yoga or action practices. This is called as, I'm forgetting it right now. What is it? Bhakti yoga. Bhakti yoga is the devotion. This is the Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga is the yoga that, you guys, there's a lot of these studios that have opened where you can sit and breathe and all of that stuff, right? And then this top up here is the Jnana Yoga. It's immediate knowledge. So one approach to get here is nothing. You do nothing, you realize this, and as long as you can be watchful about it, you're done. That's it. The answer is there, right? Many times it's very, very hard. As simple as this is very hard. So what you do is you come back into the world and try to practice all these 3 paths, eventually to get to this state, right? So one way to think about this is, lover's embrace. This is if you ever think about the most happiest moment in your life, has been not so much embracing is a more of a metaphor here, but really when you're with somebody, right? When you're with somebody that is very loving, it could be your mom, it could be your wife, it could be your lover, it could be whatever, right? Just imagine that for a second. I love you, that state. Now there, what has happened is in that happiest moment, if you think about it, you have forgotten yourself. That little mini me is gone, right? You are loving that company. And then guess what? You also forget that other is the other. And it is all about love. Love is all that remains, right? That's why I've kind of grayed out this I and you. Subject and object have gone, and this notion of action stays. That is it. And now, why is that a blissful state? It's blissful because the desire is truly then fulfilled. Now, here the desire is used in a different connotation than our typical desires. When you say, I love you, the stress is upon I. There is still that ego, right? I want you, right? So there is a desire. There's a different kind of a desire. But there are states when you are in that state, the I vanishes. There's no requirement from the other person. You just enjoy, there's this blissful state. There's not like, you're not dancing or anything. That's not what I'm talking about. It's just, there's something different about it. You feel complete. You feel one at that point. And that is that fulfilled state where all the desires drop on their own accord. And guess what? You're not pulled into that samsara, the circle of life suddenly, right? And that is the state that we are always seeking. No matter what you do, no matter good, bad, whatever, if you really look at the bottom line of that action, you're really trying to seek that fulfillment state. Why does it seem fulfilled? What are these human desires? We just talked about that. Pursuit always leads to suffering. And we do not know actually what we seek. We think our object is that ice cream, or that, I want to be with that person forever. A lot of these things that we pray for seem very, very transactional, So one of the things that Oscar Wilde says is, when the gods wish to punish us, they answer our prayers. I love Oscar Wilde, by the way, as you've noticed. So there are three different edges to this triangle. This is from Vivekananda. He was another saint who came to this country in 1800s and kind of brought Hinduism, a new light of Hinduism, to the whole world. There's a ton of literature that is available about him online. You just have to type Vivekananda. So he says there are these three key elements about love. If they don't exist, then it's not love. Fear, no fear, actually. I should have put the no fear. And then there is a freedom. You give the other person freedom to do anything. You don't judge, right? That is it. That's the true state of love. And no expectations, right? That is the true state of love. And, we have different notion of love though, right? Anyway, so this is all good. And okay, so in conclusion, what I want to say is, Upanishad says that thou art, that consciousness, that slide, we have these three states, the transactional state, that is that state. You are actually that consciousness. The books are saying that, but what we have to do? We have to learn, like you've been listening to me. Now you're going to question me. That is all good. But, take your time, take your daily time, next few weeks or whatever. Think about this, try to internalize this and try to learn more about it. And they say you do that until you self-realize. And what is this self-realization? You actually realize that I am that consciousness, not just because books are saying that, right? And why do all of this? Is because illusion helps us deal with the notion that world is illusion helps us deal with fear. You were fearful of a tiger in the dream, but then you can laugh about it, right? Illusion helps us get over any attachments. You feel like you can never live without this person. And guess what? We have gone through some divorces and, whatever. And we realize at that moment, it was very, very painful, but, we got over it. Oneness. Why is oneness important? This notion of oneness. Oneness helps us not feel disgusted about anything or anyone, helps us not feel biased towards anything or anyone. Again, that I like this and I don't like this. So these are the two key things, right? World is illusion, oneness is everything, helps us deal with world with equanimity. You don't like or you don't dislike, you don't gravitate towards Hinduism just because, boy, this sounds really amazing. No. Just, it's okay. You try to use it in your real life and be equanimous about it. I'm the one sets our generous spirit loose. I'm the one can be megalomania, right? But it can also be generosity, right? Open for experiences, open for possibilities, accommodate losses and wins. right? Key, very important. You should have the ability to say no to others, but you should also have the ability to listen to no. There's going to be rejection. How can you take that into your stride, right? Ultimately get closer to that reality, the reality that we talked about. Focus on existence, awareness, and bliss. Be liberated, no anger, no fear, pure fun, no death, birth, eternal, all pervading, right? That's it. Thank you, Marina. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Yeah.
Thank you.